Okay, let's just jump right in. Welcome back to the Deep Dive. I'm your host, and I have to say right off the bat, today feels different. It feels a little strange.
It does. There's an immediacy to it that we don't usually have.
Exactly. Usually we're looking back, we're analyzing something that's already happened, a historical event, or maybe a report that's been out for months. We're trying to make sense of things that have settled.
Right. We're coming at it with hindsight. We're analysts.
But today, not so much. It is Tuesday, February 3rd, 2026. And if you've glanced at any news source today, you know that the world feels like like it's coming apart at the seams.
It's chaotic. Things are happening in real time that are just deeply disturbing.
And that's where this gets weird. Because the stack of sources on the desk in front of us isn't just about the news. It's about a book, a piece of fiction, a thriller that was published about a year ago, back in mid-2025.
And somehow this book seems to have predicted the specific chaos of this specific week with a precision that is, well, it's more than a little unsettling.
It's incredibly unsettling. So let's set the stage, just so we're all on the same page before we dive into the fiction itself. We've got a source here. It's a pretty grim intelligence report. It's titled Global Unrest and the Collapse of Civic Order.
And it's dated for this week. It's current.
It's very current. And it highlights two major global hotspots right now. The first one is Iran.
Yeah. The situation there it's gone far beyond what anyone expected. According to this report, what started as economic protests in late 2025 it's exploded. It's a full-scale uprising.
We're not talking about a few scattered protests here and there. This is major.
Oh, no. The regime has shut down the internet completely, a total blackout. And the reports that are leaking out are horrifying. They're using heavy machine guns on crowds. There are reports of chemical weapons.
And a death toll.
The estimated death toll in this report alone it's between 30,000 and 36,500 demonstrators killed.
Let that number sink in for a second. 30,000 people. That is the size of a small city.
It's a massacre. They're raiding hospitals to find wounded protesters. It's a complete and total breakdown of any kind of human rights norm, a collapse.
And at the exact same time that this nightmare is unfolding over there, we have this bizarre, almost parallel tension happening right here at home in Minnesota, of all places.
Which seems so random, right? But the report is very clear. It highlights this massive corruption scandal in Minnesota. It's called the Feeding Our Future program.
This was supposed to be a nutrition program for kids, for daycare centers.
Supposed to be. Instead, the intel shows it was a front, a scheme to steal $250 million, $250 million.
And it's not just financial crime. The tension there has boiled over. There have been these large anti-ICE protests in the state, and the report, it connects civilian deaths during those protests directly to, and I'm quoting the report here, monstrous incompetence by federal agents.
Monstrous incompetence. What a phrase. That's not a term you see in these kinds of reports lightly.
No, it's not. So you have this fire in Iran, and you have this rot in Minnesota. Corruption and federal failure. Those are the hard facts of February 3rd, 2026. And now we bring in the fiction.
The Brazilian Parrot, by an author named Zayvan Vardanyan, published in mid-2025.
And when it came out, it was just, a thriller, something you'd grab at an airport bookstore.
Right, a spy novel. But reading it today, in this context, it doesn't read like a thriller anymore. It reads like a future documentary, like a briefing document for what's happening right now.
It's just eerie. And we're not talking about some vague Nostradamus-style prediction that you have to squint to make fit.
No, not at all. It's the specifics. The geography. The book's plot is set in Iran and Minnesota, and it revolves around the exact same themes we're seeing in the news. The brutal persecution of a religious minority in Iran and the staggering incompetence of federal agents in the United States. It's a mirror, a fictional mirror held up to a reality that hadn't happened yet when it was written.
So that's our mission for this deep dive. We're going to unpack this thriller, The Brazilian Parrot, but not just as a story, even though it is one hell of a story. We want to use it as a kind of lens, a way to maybe understand the geopolitical mess that we are all living through right now.
And we'll dig into the author's really sharp critique of, what heroism means today, of bureaucracy, and this central terrifying theme of silence.
Okay, so to do that, we've got a decent stack of sources. Obviously, we have the novel itself. We also have a really fascinating exclusive transcript of an interview with the author, Zayvan Vardanyan.
We've got that intelligence report on global unrest we mentioned. There's one more thing, a visual source. It's a photograph. And honestly, it is. It's haunting. It's an image of Baha'i girls who were hanged in Shiraz, Iran. And that image is really the emotional core of the whole book.
Okay, so I want to start with this prophetic angle because, look, I'm a skeptic by nature. Authors predict things. Tom Clancy famously predicted a passenger jet being used as a weapon. Is this just a really, really lucky guess?
I don't think it is. I really don't. And that's based on the interview with Vardanyan. He says pretty explicitly he wasn't trying to see the future. He was just paying attention to the present back in 2024, 2025.
What do you mean?
He talks about seeing the cracks that were already there. The building tension in Iran wasn't a secret. Let's call it bureaucratic rot, in certain federal agencies wasn't a secret either. He says he just took those existing trend lines and followed them to their logical, albeit horrifying, conclusion.
So he didn't predict the earthquake. He just saw the fault line and said, hey, that thing looks like it's going to go.
That's a perfect way to put it. But it's the precision of the geography that makes it feel so uncanny right now. Iran and Minnesota. He chose those two specific places to weave his story together.
And it's like he saw two completely separate wounds on the globe, one in the Middle East, one in the American Midwest, and somehow understood they were symptoms of the same disease.
A disease of institutional failure and brutal intolerance. And he stitches them together into this single narrative.
So let's talk about the man who did the stitching. The architect of this story, Zevin Vardanyan, because he's an interesting figure. The interview transcript we have, it reveals something that I think completely changes how you read this book. He didn't originally write it as a novel.
No, and this is so critical to understanding his intent. He wrote it as a screenplay first. He saw it all visually, like a movie, but he made a very conscious decision to pivot to a book.
Why? I mean, a movie deal is usually the dream, right? That's the jackpot for an author.
It is. But he says in the interview he did it specifically to avoid Hollywood distortion. He was terrified a studio or a director would get their hands on it and sanitize it, sand down the sharp edges.
What kind of distortion was he worried about?
He was worried about the ending. He talks at length about this concept he has, which he calls the anti-fairy tale.
The anti-fairy tale. Okay, break that down.
Well, think about how most stories we consume end. You know the formula. The hero slays the dragon, saves the princess, the music swells, and credits. Happily ever after. Vardanyan argues that this entire structure is a fundamental lie.
Oh, lie how?
He uses this incredible metaphor of a saved game. You know, like in a video game.
Yeah.
You beat the final boss, the screen says congratulations, and you can turn it off, you're safe, the story's over. But real life doesn't have a saved game screen.
The struggle doesn't just end.
Exactly. He says the trauma is still there the next morning, the physical wounds don't magically heal, the psychological scars are still there. For Vardanyan, the real story, the real struggle, begins after the dragon is slain. That's the part nobody wants to talk about.
And he knew Hollywood would. They just want the dragon slaying part. They'd want the high five at the end and the ride into the sunset.
Of course. They'd force a neat, tidy, happy ending on it. And he wanted to write about the cost of victory, the messy, painful, unglamorous aftermath. And for that, he needed the control that writing a novel gives you.
Wow. That is a dark but profound way to approach storytelling. It sets you up from the beginning to know this isn't going to be an easy ride.
Not at all. And his personal motivation is just as important. He's writing with deep passion about the persecution of the Baha'i community in Iran. But Vardanyan himself, he's not Baha'i.
Right. The interview says he's Christian.
He is. But he says he felt this moral compulsion to break what he calls the ring of silence around the Baha'i tragedy. He poses this question in the interview. He says, should I cover my eyes, ears, and mouth just because I am not Baha'i?
It's a rhetorical question, obviously. For him, the answer is no.
For him, silence isn't a neutral act. It's a form of complicity. He argues that if you see an injustice and you say nothing because it's not happening to your group, you are actively participating in the betrayal of just basic humanism. It's a powerful stance.
And so he creates these characters to carry the weight of that stand. Let's meet them, because they are.
Yeah.
They are not your typical heroes. They're pretty broken. First, there's Peter Rue. I have to admit, I kind of relate to Peter. He's 45 years old. He's a burnt-out YouTuber, a former soldier. He's tired.
He's very relatable in his weariness, but he's also an archetype that Vardanyan is trying to take apart and put back together in a new way. He's not the typical action hero, running and jumping and shooting.
No, because something happens to him very early on that prevents that. Vardanyan compares him to Nero Wolfe.
Yes, the classic detective from the Rex Stout novels. The brilliant, obese detective who was so agoraphobic he refused to leave his brownstone in New York.
He solved every case from his armchair while his assistant, Archie Goodwin, did all the legwork out in the real world.
Precisely. And in the Brazilian Parrot, Peter gets very seriously injured at the very beginning of the story. We'll get to the gory details. And that injury forces him into a Nero Wolfe role. He is physically trapped, mostly in a chair. His body is compromised, so he's forced to rely entirely on his mind to solve this sprawling conspiracy.
It cleverly subverts the genre. It turns what could be a standard action thriller into an intellectual puzzle. It does. And then you have the person he's trying to solve the puzzle for, Tamina Garani. She's an Iranian-American human rights activist. She's the catalyst for everything. And Vardanyan makes a really interesting point in the interview about her. He says he was determined not to make her a symbol, but a living woman. What do you think he meant by that?
I think he meant he wanted to avoid the trap of the activist character who is just a walking, talking pamphlet. The character who exists only to deliver exposition and statistics about their cause.
The mouthpiece.
Exactly. Tamina isn't that. She has fears. She gets tired. Vardanyan writes about her fatigue, the sheer exhaustion of being a professional voice for the oppressed. She's not just angry. She's worn out by the fight. And that humanity, that vulnerability, makes her so much more real and compelling.
And their meeting is the spark that lights the fuse. He's a journalist, a YouTuber, looking for a compelling story. He reaches out to her for an interview, and he gets way more than he bargained for.
He walks directly into a catastrophe. Okay, so let's get into that. Section 2. The incident. This is where the story kicks off, and where this fictional world starts to feel uncomfortably real. This is the inciting incident. Peter is at Tamina's small office in Dallas. He's just finishing up the interview. The book hints at a little bit of a spark between them. Maybe he's working up the nerve to ask her out for coffee, and then a massive explosion.
A car bomb right outside her office window.
A car bomb. And in that split second, Peter's character is forged. He doesn't think. He doesn't analyze. He just reacts. He grabs Tamina and throws himself on top of her, shielding her with his own body.
It's the classic heroic act. But the consequences are not classic at all. The description of his injury, it's brutal. It's not a clean bullet wound.
No, it's visceral. The book describes this huge, jagged shard of glass from the window that gets driven into his lower back near his spine. It's a messy, debilitating, grotesque injury. It immediately takes him off the board as a physical hero.
And there's a detail here that seems so minor when you first read it, but it comes back in such a powerful way later on. The diaper detail.
Yes. We should definitely put a pin in that. When they're in the safe house later, he finds a pack of adult diapers and makes a dark joke about them. It seems like a throwaway line.
But it's not. It's crucial foreshadowing. It signals the reality of dealing with a severe, messy wound and foreshadows the lengths he'll go to later.
Right. So the bomb goes off. There's chaos. First responders arrive. And this is where Vardanyan introduces that stark contrast, that theme of competence versus incompetence.
He calls them the old guard and the new guard.
Exactly. The old guard are the first on the scene, a local cop named Officer Jerry, a nurse named Donna. They're pragmatic, they're humane, they have common sense. They see a bleeding man and a terrified woman, and they help. They just do their jobs.
And then the new guard arrives.
And the FBI crashes the party. Agents X and Y, Agents Bradley and Morris.
Who sound more like brand names than people.
And they're written that way intentionally. Vardanyan says in the interview that while they might seem like caricatures of bureaucratic absurdity, he was just reproducing the reality he'd observed. These agents are arrogant, they're ambitious, they're focused on their careers, and they are dangerously, catastrophically incompetent.
And we see that incompetence on full display in this one scene in the hospital that just makes your blood boil. Peter's lying there in a hospital bed. He's just had surgery. He's sedated, and he just took a bomb for this woman.
Yeah.
And the FBI walks in and accuses him of being the bomber.
It's absolutely Kafkaesque. It's insane.
What is their logic? How do they even get there?
It's the most twisted logic imaginable. They get a hold of the recording of the interview he just did with Tamina. And in that interview, being a good journalist, he asked her tough questions. Aren't you scared? What are the risks of your work? Do you feel safe?
Standard questions for a human rights activist, of course. But the FBI's bureaucratic minds look at this and see a conspiracy. Their logic is, he asked her if she felt safe, therefore he knew she was unsafe. He must be involved. He must be the threat. They look at the hero, the man who is literally the only reason the target is still alive, and because he doesn't fit into their neat little box, they decide he's the villain.
It's the perfect illustration of the book's critique. It's not about finding the truth. It's about finding the easiest narrative, the path of least resistance to close the case file and get a good performance review.
It's just lazy. And it feels so.
Oh,
We keep coming back to that phrase from our Real World 2026 report, monstrous incompetence. It's the same pattern. Federal agents completely misreading a situation, creating chaos instead of solving it.
Exactly. And while the FBI is busy chasing this ridiculous theory, the real question is left hanging. Why was Tamina targeted? And to answer that, the book has to take us into the deep end. We have to talk about the Baha'i tragedy. And this is really the core of the novel, isn't it? The thriller plot, the chase, the conspiracy. That's all the vehicle, but this history, this pain, is the cargo it's carrying.
Absolutely. The author uses Tamina's voice and also his own voice in a powerful author's note at the end to educate the reader about a very real, very brutal history.
Which brings us to that visual source, the photograph of the executed girls in Shiraz. The book references this event directly. Can you walk us through the history here for listeners who might not be familiar? It's a truly harrowing story. We have to go back to 1983 in the city of Shiraz in Iran, shortly after the Islamic Revolution. The new regime rounded up and arrested a group of Baha'i women and girls. Their only crime was their faith.
And among them was a girl who has since become a symbol of this persecution, Mona Mahmoudijad.
Mona. She was 17 years old, and she and the others were interrogated, they were tortured, and they were repeatedly offered a deal. Just say you are Muslim, just recant your faith, and you can walk out that door and go home to your family.
And they all refused. A 17-year-old girl choosing death over a lie.
So the regime decided to make an example of them. They took 10 of them, including Mona, to a public square, and they hanged them. But the way they did it was an act of psychological torture.
They didn't just hang them all at once.
No, they made them wait in line. They hanged them one by one, forcing the others to watch, forcing them to see their friend, their mother, their sister die, hoping that the next woman in line would break. See what's coming for you. It's not too late. Just recant.
And none of them did.
Not one. The historical accounts say that Mona, when it was her turn, actually kissed the rope before they put it around her neck. That's almost impossible to comprehend that level of conviction and courage. And it raises the question for a lot of people, why? Why is the Iranian regime so obsessed with, so terrified of, this small, peaceful religious group? They're not a political party. They're not armed militants. So that's what makes it so tragic. Their core beliefs are seen as an existential threat to the regime's power. The Baha'i faith is, theologically speaking, a new revelation that comes after Islam. It preaches the absolute equality of women and men.
Which is a direct challenge to the patriarchal clerical
A
establishment.
massive challenge. It preaches the unity of all religions and all of humanity. And perhaps most critically, it teaches that you don't need a clergy. You don't need an intermediary, a mullah, to have a relationship with God.
And if you are a theocratic regime whose entire power structure is based on a clerical hierarchy, that is a dangerous idea.
It's a revolutionary idea. If the people don't need the mullahs to speak to God, then the mullahs are out of a job and out of power. So they can't tolerate the Baha'is. They have to paint them as heretics, as enemies of the state.
And Vardanyan's author's note makes it clear this isn't ancient history. He talks about the current reality for the 300,000 Baha'is still in Iran. He calls it a slow strangulation.
Right. The mass executions of the 80s got some bad international press, so the regime adapted, they became more insidious. Now it's about making it impossible for the community to survive.
How do they do that?
They've created a kind of social and economic apartheid. If you are a member of the Baha'i faith in Iran today, you are barred from higher education. You cannot go to university, period. You are banned from all government jobs. Baha'i-owned businesses are routinely shut down for no reason. Their cemeteries are desecrated. We're talking bulldozers leveling gravestones. It's an attempt to erase them from society, to make them non-people without creating headline-grabbing massacres.
And the official justification, the label they use to sell this to their people, is that the Baha'is are spies for Israel. We hear that a lot.
It's a very convenient and very cynical lie. The Baha'i World Center, their holiest site, is located in Haifa, which is in modern-day Israel. But that's because the founder of the faith, Baha'u'llah, was exiled there by the Ottoman Empire in the 1860s.
Decades before the State of Israel even existed.
Exactly. It's a complete historical accident. But the regime twists that fact to paint an entire community of its own citizens as a fifth column of foreign spies. It's pure propaganda.
So this is what Temene is fighting against. She's a voice for these people. She's bringing this slow strangulation to light, and that's why she's a target.
That's the assumption. But while the FBI is fumbling around, Peter, stuck in his chair, realizes he needs someone who is actually competent to figure this out. He needs real help.
Enter Bob.
Bob. I love the character of Bob. He's the expert. He's the old-school private investigator, Peter's former boss from his military days, his war buddy. He is the walking embodiment of competence in a world drowning in incompetence.
And they have this code phrase which gives the book its title, The Brazilian Parrot. I have to admit, when I read the interview where Vardinian explains this, I laughed. It sounds so absurd.
It does sound like something out of a Monty Python sketch, but the logic behind it is very sound. It's a form of steganography, hiding a message in plain sight.
How does it work?
Well, think about it. If you're in trouble and you text a friend, "Help, I'm being followed," that text message contains key words that intelligence agency algorithms are constantly scanning for. Help, followed, attack. It could get flagged.
Okay, I see.
But if you text your friend, "Hey, remember that story about the Brazilian parrot? So funny." No algorithm in the world is going to care about that. It's meaningless noise to an outsider, but to the insider who knows the code, it's a clear signal.
And the meaning of the phrase evolves through the book.
It does. It starts as a simple safety check between Peter and Bob. Then, when things get really bad, it becomes the signal for a media strike. The parrots have flown the coop is the code for Bob to release all the damaging information they've gathered to the press.
And eventually it becomes a symbol of something much sadder.
Yeah. By the end, it becomes a symbol of personal defeat. But we'll get to that.
So Bob, the competent one, gets the signal. He starts digging. And because he's not an idiot, he finds the connections that the FBI completely missed. What's the big break?
He finds the Minnesota connection. He traces the specific chemical signature of the explosives used in the Dallas car bomb, and he matches it to a batch that was reported stolen from a mining company up in Minnesota.
And that leads him to the true villain of the story. It's not the Iranian regime, not directly.
No. The web of shell corporations and ownership of that mining company leads directly to a sitting U.S. Senator, Grayson Hawkins.
Who is, of course, a complete hypocrite.
The biggest. On the surface, he's a knight of justice. A populist politician who gives these fiery speeches about fighting for the little guy and taking on corruption. But in private, he is a predator, a monster.
And this is another one of those moments where the fiction from 2025 just slams into the reality of 2026. That feeding our future scandal in Minnesota,
Yeah.
it's about using a charitable front to steal hundreds of millions of public dollars.
And that's exactly what Hawkins is doing in the book. He's using this mining initiative and a private security firm he controls, a group of thugs called Black Proxy, to embezzle funds and silence anyone who gets in his way.
And it turns out Timony isn't just a random activist he decided to help frame. She has a personal connection to him.
That's the twist. Years ago, before she became a full-time activist, she worked as a junior aide in his office. She saw things. She knows where the bodies are buried, literally and figuratively. She's not just a threat to the Iranian regime. She's a direct threat to Senator Hawkins' criminal empire.
So the motive isn't the Iranian government wants to kill a Baha'i activist. That's the cover story. The real motive is a corrupt American politician needs to silence a witness. And he's cleverly using the real-world persecution of the Baha'is as a smokescreen.
It's a brilliant narrative move by Vardonian because it indicts the hypocrisy at home just as much as the tyranny abroad. It shows how cynical actors within our own system can exploit the genuine suffering of people overseas for their own selfish criminal gain.
So while Bob is uncovering all of this, Peter and Tamina are stuck in an FBI safe house in the Lost Pines forest near Bastrop, Texas, and the FBI agents guarding them. They just continue to be the new guard.
Oh, it descends into a farce, a deadly farce. Agents X and Y, Bradley and Morris. They're cooped up, they're paranoid. They start suspecting each other of being the mole. Their incompetence creates this feedback loop of terror and suspicion.
And it leads to that unbelievable friendly fire incident.
It's both absurd and terrifying. The book depicts the scene where one team of FBI agents staking out a nearby house gets spooked by the other team of FBI agents in the woods, and they just open fire on each other. It's a chaotic, bloody mess caused by nothing but their own jumpiness and lack of professionalism.
Which, again, you read that, and you can't help but think of that real-world 2026 report. That phrase, monstrous incompetence, leading to deaths during the anti-IC protests. Vardanian just changed the setting from a protest to a safe house, but the core element-armed, jumpy authorities panicking and shooting their own is identical.
It's a powerful statement on the danger of a system that promotes ambition over ability. The old guard characters like Bob and Peter, they care about the mission. The new guard agents X and Y, they care about the optics, the press conference, the next promotion. And when things go wrong, their first instinct is to panic and start shooting. Okay, so this brings us to some of the deeper, more philosophical layers of the book. Let's talk about Section 5, the philosophy of heroism and hypocrisy. There's this concept Vardanyan mentions in the interview, the Mickey Mouse theory. What on earth is that? It's a funny name for a very dark idea. He says that evil used to be more subtle. The villain in an old movie wore a mask or lurked in the shadows. But today, he argues, evil doesn't hide anymore. It walks around with a big, friendly, smiling face, like Mickey Mouse.
It's about the audacity of hypocrisy.
Exactly. It's Senator Grayson Hawkins. He doesn't need to hide his corruption behind a decent facade because the facade itself is the weapon. He can smile for the cameras, give a speech about family values, and then go back to his office and order a car bomb. The hypocrisy is so blatant, so shameless, that people almost can't believe it's real. It's evil hiding in plain sight.
And this idea of hypocrisy connects to the author's note at the end of the book, which it's pretty controversial. Vardanyan takes a direct shot at what he sees as the failures of Western feminism. Now, we should be clear, we're just reporting on the author's stated views here.
Right. It's a very short critique. He draws this stark contrast. He says that while feminism in the West is, rightly, focused on important issues like wage gaps and representation, there is a profound and deafening silence when it comes to the lived reality for millions of women in other parts of the world.
He's talking about things like execution, public flogging, forced child marriage for girls as young as 9 or 10.
Yes. And he argues this silence comes from what he calls the cultural identity trap.
Explain that.
The idea is that we in the West have become so terrified of being accused of colonialism or intolerance that we've started to label clear-cut human rights abuses as just culture. We say, oh, well, that's just their way of doing things. Who are we to judge?
And his argument, voiced through Temene in the book, is that this is a moral cop-out.
A complete cop-out. He argues that human rights are universal. Murder is murder, whether it happens in Dallas or Tehran. You can't excuse the hanging of a 17-year-old girl by calling it culture. And he argues that a truly global feminism should be screaming from the rooftops about these atrocities, not quietly looking away for fear of offending someone.
It's a provocative argument. And in the middle of this, you have the character of Peter. The book positions him as a representative of a very specific, maybe even dated form of masculinity, the old-school protector.
It does. And Temene gives this incredibly powerful speech about it near the book's climax. She manages to get on a live CNN interview, and she uses the platform to talk about heroism. She praises this specific kind of masculinity, not toxic, not dominant, but sacrificial and protective.
She contrasts Peter, the man who bled for her without demanding thanks, with Senator Hawkins, the man who uses his power and charisma to prey on women.
Exactly. She draws a clear line between protective strength and predatory strength. And the ultimate irony is, as she's making this nuanced, powerful point about how the world still needs men like Peter, the network cuts her feed.
Why?
Because it's politically incorrect. It doesn't fit the simple, prepackaged narrative the media and the book wants to sell. The idea of a man as a quiet, noble protector it's seen as problematic. It complicates the simple victim-oppressor binary. It's Vardanyan again, just poking the bear of modern discourse.
And that idea of quiet, sacrificial protection leads us directly to the climax, the escape. This is the part of the book that it floored me. They realize the safe house is compromised. They have to flee on foot through the woods to the town of Bastrop.
And Peter is still badly injured. He's weak. He's carrying this heavy backpack. And at a certain point, Tamina just collapses from exhaustion. She can't go on.
And he has this charming, heroic moment. He quotes Sam Gamgee from The Lord of the Rings, the Mr. Frodo moment.
I can't carry the ring for you, but I can carry you. It's a beautiful line. And he picks her up, puts her over his shoulder, and carries her the rest of the way. It feels like the ultimate heroic movie moment.
But it's not. The reality of what's happening in that moment is so much darker and so much more profound. This is where the diaper detail from the beginning comes back.
This is the gut punch. This is what validates that entire theme of old-school masculinity. We find out later what was really going on. When Peter picked her up, he knew his back wound wasn't healed. He knew the strain of carrying her for miles through the woods would tear his stitches wide open. He knew he would start bleeding, possibly bleeding to death.
So before they left the safe house, he took one of those adult diapers he found, and he taped it to his lower back.
He used it as a massive absorbent bandage.
Not for himself, for her. He did it to soak up the blood, to hide the fact that he was bleeding out, because he knew that if she saw the blood soaking through his shirt, she would panic. She would refuse to let him carry her, and they would both be caught.
It's the ultimate act of quiet sacrifice. It is not glorious, it's not glamorous, it's messy and it's grotesque. He doesn't do it to get applause or to look like a hero. He does it purely because it is the only logical, practical way to ensure her survival, even at the cost of his own.
And he pays a price for it. The second they reach safety in Bastrop, the second he knows she's okay, the adrenaline wears off and he collapses. He falls into a coma from massive blood loss.
He literally gives everything he has to get her to that finish line.
And if this were that Hollywood movie Vardanyan was so afraid of, that's where the story would end. He'd wake up from the coma, she'd be by his bedside, they'd kiss, fade to black. But this is the anti-fairy tale. He refuses to give us that easy out. Which brings us to the epilogue, section 7. Losing the peace. We jump forward 6 years, and it is just, it's bleak. It's one of the most quietly devastating endings I've ever read. It's not a happy ending.
Not even close. It's the definition of a Pyrrhic victory.
Paint the picture for us. What is Peter's life like 6 years after his heroic act? He's alive, but he's not living. He's in this small, cluttered apartment. And the book gives us this one perfect, crushing detail. He's drinking instant coffee, which for his character, a coffee snob, is a cardinal sin.
It's a symbol that he's given up. He's given up on the small pleasures, on quality, on life. He's just going through the motions, surrounded by old photos. He's completely alone.
Vardanyan calls this losing the peace. Peter won the war. He saved Tamina, they exposed Senator Hawkins. But he lost the peace. He pushed Tamina away after he recovered. Why?
The trauma of the saved game. He survived, but he felt broken by it. He was dealing with PTSD, chronic pain from his injury, and he felt like he was damaged goods. He thought she deserved a shining knight, not a broken soldier with scars and nightmares. So out of a misguided sense of love, or maybe guilt, he let her go. He ghosted her. It's a quiet tragedy of self-sabotage.
And to pour salt in the wound, we find out that Bob is dead.
Yeah. And he wasn't killed by a bad guy. No dramatic shootout. He died of leukemia.
That hit me really hard when I read it. Bob, the one truly competent man in the whole story. The one who solved everything. Taken out by a random, mundane disease.
It's deeply symbolic. It represents the dying of the old guard, the competent, loyal, no-nonsense people like Bob and Officer Jerry are fading away, leaving the world to be run by the agents X and Ys. It's a profoundly pessimistic vision of the future where the people who actually know how to fix things are disappearing.
And the code phrase, the Brazilian parrot, makes one final, tragic appearance. Peter says to himself, the Brazilian parrot is dead. He's admitting total personal defeat.
It's the bottom, until the very last pages. His former assistant, Betty G. Rose, who is this wonderful, fiery character, shows up at his apartment.
She brings him 2 things, news and an ultimatum.
The news is that after years of legal battles, Senator Hawkins is finally being extradited to face justice. The bad guy has finally lost. Justice is served.
But that's not why she's there. She stages an intervention. She looks at the state of his life, and she demands that he pick up the phone and call Tamina.
She tells him to stop being a coward and to fight for his own peace. And the entire novel ends right there, with him holding the phone. On the precipice of that call, we never know if he makes it.
It leaves the burden of hope entirely on the reader. Will he finally try to win the peace after winning the war?
It's an incredibly powerful, ambiguous ending.
So let's bring this all together. Let's try to synthesize. We've gone through the book, the author's intent, the real-world parallels. What does it all mean for us sitting here today on February 3rd, 2026, watching these exact scenarios play out on the news?
I think it forces us to confront this convergence of fiction and reality. A book written a year ago managed to pinpoint the exact geography of our current crises, Iran and Minnesota. It diagnosed the disease of our institutions, that monstrous incompetence. But more than that, it predicted the emotional and moral stakes.
The core message seems to be that quote from the interview. Silence is betrayal.
That's it, right there. It's the central thesis. Whether it's the world's silence on the slow strangulation of the Baha'is in Iran because it's messy and it's not our problem, or our own silence about corruption in our own communities in places like Minnesota because it's just politics and we don't want to get involved. Vardanyan is screaming that there is no neutral ground.
He challenges our very definition of what it means to be safe. Tamina says it in the book. She calls safety a prison if it comes at the cost of silence. If the FBI can protect your body but demands your voice in return, are you truly safe? Or are you just a well-guarded prisoner?
It's a terrifying question.
And that's the final provocative thought I want to leave everyone with today. We all want safety. We all want that saved game screen to pop up so we can relax. But as this novel, this prophetic, unsettling novel points out, the game is never over. And maybe the scariest question it asks is this. In a world that feels like it's being taken over by the agents X and Ys, by the ambitious, the incompetent, the career-driven, do we still have room for the Peters and Bobs? Do we as a society still value that quiet, sacrificial, often messy competence? Or have we decided collectively to just let the Brazilian parrot die?
That's the choice, I think.
Thank you for listening to The Deep Dive. Stay safe, but more importantly, stay loud. We'll see you next time.